I started off being a guitar player and I wanted to be, you know, the quiet one at the back sort of thing. And I just wasn't really good enough to be the quiet one at the back. The only other option left to me was to be the singer.
Suede's eponymous first album went straight to the top of the charts in 1992 and won the Mercury Music Prize. But the band, which had included Justine Frischmann, who was also his partner until they split and she left to form Elastica, had taken a while to get going. And in his memoir, Brett Anderson concentrates on his own early failures. Influenced by the Smiths and compared to Bowie, who was a fan of Suede, the band became more experimental than their Britpop pack, and 25 years on from their debut are about to release a new record. It was time for a bit of reflection.
I just fancied writing something. It was just one of those things. I didn't have a deal or anything. I wrote it for my son, and that's kind of where the genesis of the book comes from. We were dirt poor, existing in penury in a cheap council house, but my parents filled it with trappings more akin to the lives of upper-middle-class Hampstead intellectuals. Mum's paintings were everywhere. She had decorated the whole place with strong colours, midnight blues, William Morris wallpapers, and her own rich velvet homemade curtains in the windows. And everywhere, of course, was the deafening torrent of my father's classical music. He used to see music as this sort of like charged battleground of opinion, and for her music was sort of just something nice that you'd listen to. She was much more visual. She was an artist. She spent most of her time painting, and when she wasn't painting she'd be mending things and fixing things and making things. So it was a very creative sort of environment. The only way we could possess things was by making them.
But you grew up knowing that there was no money?
I'm not sure. I think later I became aware of that, but when you're very young you don't really have that sense of perspective. Apart from a cheap electric oven, we had no mod cons, so my mother washed and dried all of our clothes by hand, something that seems unbelievable to my pampered 21st century self. There was no central heating in the house, just a small fireplace in the lounge and a little paraffin heater in the kitchen. The coal-black mornings were brutal, and the ritual of lighting and maintaining the fire assumed a religious status.
You've chosen not to put photographs in. I feel I have an image of your parents very clearly in my head, but why did you decide not to put photographs in?
It was a very conscious decision. I wanted to make the writing as descriptive as I can, so that hopefully you don't really need the photographs. And I just wanted to give the book a kind of tone, I suppose. And
you deliberately said that you didn't want to do a Coke and Gold Discs memoir. You wanted to do a memoir of, you call it failure. Why do you call it failure?
Well, that was the tone that I thought, that was the sort of word that I thought kind of summed up a lot of my upbringing and, you know, my parents' situation in the world, and also a lot of the experience of being in Suede in the early days was kind of like a failure after failure, struggle after struggle. And it seemed to be the word that sort of summed it all up. And that's why I ended up finishing at the point that I finished the book, because I finished it where we got signed, and I thought that was a very symbolic moment.
Enter Suede, who've been hailed by the rock press as the best new band in Britain. Tonight, they make their first television appearance.
There is a part in the book where you are with Justine Frischmann and your mother dies.
It was a huge, incredibly influential period of my life where I met Justine, and that opened up so many sort of vistas in my life. And you know, a year or so later my mum dies, and these incredible kind of clashing emotions happening in me. And I think without those two events, I think I probably wouldn't have had the sort of sense of carpe diem that I needed in order to sort of make the band happen.
You then wrote a song for your mother.
See you in your next life.
The interesting thing about that song, The Next Life, is that when I wrote it I didn't really realise what it was about, and it wasn't till later that I kind of was able to assess it and realise that it was about that event.
Far away, so far away.
You talk in the book that actually Justine Frischmann leaving the band, in a sense, was the making of it.
Before Justine left, she was kind of not really happy with where we were going. I think she had a different vision for what she'd like Suede to be, and I think that kind of confused things. And she went on to sort of realise that vision with Elastica, I think, which was fantastic. But I think that allowed us to sort of do what we ended up doing with things with the songs on Dogman Star, the more grandiose stuff.
I get the sense you don't really like the association with Britpop now.
I don't like what it became. I was documenting Britishness, Englishness, whatever you want to call it. And I think those other bands that came later were celebrating it. And I think that's the difference. I documented it because it was part of the world I saw around me, and I wanted to document real life. It was almost like a slightly scruffy Mike Leigh kind of vision of the world that I saw around me, and I think it kind of became mutated from like a Mike Leigh film into a Carry On film.
It was a period of creativity. Do you think there's been a period of creativity since like it?
I think it was the last big movement in alternative music, and it had value in that sense. I think its rejection of American cultural imperialism was a really powerful statement, and possibly the best thing about it. And the fact that it moved alternative music into the mainstream, I think that was fantastic. But finding worth out of it beyond those things is quite difficult for me.
But Anderson, thank you very much.
Thank you.